Alexander the Great. What is great? Great has many meanings, such as kind, generous, and wonderful. Nowadays, to be great, you have to be a kind person like Mother Teresa, or you have to think of something wonderful like Albert Einstein, or you have to do something incredible like Michael Jordan. Long ago, however, a king was called great if he conquered many cities and countries. Alexander was a conqueror who lived 2,000 years ago. He was very good at his job. He conquered more lands than other kings. In fact, he conquered most of the Western world. In those days, the world was quite small because Western people did not know about most of Asia, most of Africa, or any of the Americas. Their world was just a small area around the Mediterranean Sea. Alexander conquered most of this area.
무슨 바다? Mediterranean Sea. 다시 해봐.
Mediterranean Sea.
세 번 더 해.
Mediterranean Sea. Mediterranean Sea. Mediterranean Sea. His empire is now Greece, Turkey, Syria, Israel, Egypt, Iraq, Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and part of India. He left behind the largest empire in the world. He also left many great stories. When Alexander was very young, a horse trader brought a horse to Alexander's father Philip. The horse was very wild, so Philip did not want to buy it. Alexander noticed that the horse was afraid of its own shadow. He turned the horse to the sun. Then the horse became silent because it could not see its shadow. His father was pleased with Alexander, so he gave him the horse. Alexander named the horse Bucephalus and rode it most of his life. He rode it through many battles. When this horse was killed in battle, Alexander was heartbroken. He had lost his best friend. Later, he named a city after a horse. Maybe Alexander was so clever because he had a great teacher. His teacher was Aristotle. Aristotle taught him to ask questions about everything. Alexander was a good student. Even later, when he was a king, he was still curious about the world and how it works. Why did Alexander want to conquer so much? Maybe he just wanted to be great. Before Alexander, the largest empire in the world was the Persian Empire of the great King Darius. So Alexander had to conquer Persia first if he wanted to conquer anything at all. After he invaded Persia with his army, Alexander and his men beat Darius and his army. This was amazing because Darius's army had 8 times more men, while Darius escaped. Alexander spent many years trying to catch him. Darius wrote a letter to him and asked him to stop fighting. Darius opened Alexander part of his empire. Alexander refused because he wanted the whole thing. Actually, Alexander spent most of his life wanting to beat Darius. But when Alexander finally found that Darius had been killed by his own army, Alexander was disappointed and gave the dead king a big funeral. Maybe he admired Darius. Maybe Alexander realized that Darius was just like him, another Greek conqueror. If you conquer the biggest empire in the world, wasn't you stop? Not Alexander. He continued all the way to India. Nobody in the West knows anything about Indian people. The Indian armies rode a strange animals called elephants. Alexander's men had never seen one before. Alexander was not afraid. He beat the Indian armies. Then he became friends with their kings and made some of them his generals. They fought side by side with him in later battles. Was Alexander a good conqueror or a bad one? In those days, conquerors usually took all the money and made people into slaves. But sometimes conquerors made the rules battles, and people could buy and sell things more easily. Sometimes they freed the people from another conqueror. The Persians too, for example, suddenly were not happy to conquer by Greece. The Egyptians, on the other hand, were glad that Alexander freed them from the Persians. They made Alexander king of Egypt. The Indians respect Alexander for his bravery and high level of education. Alexander did more than conquer. Alexander spread great culture all over the world. Great ideas, especially mathematics, became common knowledge, and people were able to invent new things and form new ideas. A spread of culture often means a spread of technology. Alexander the Great was certainly not the most kind and generous person. Many people died because of him. When a city near his hometown river, he took his army and burned the city down. He killed most of the people. He even thought they were great. He made the rest into slaves. After that, people in other cities were afraid to fight him. The meaning of the word great has changed a lot. People 2,000 years ago were very different. They had different ideas about greatness. But nowadays, almost everyone agrees that a great person must be a good person. We know that Gandhi and Einstein were great, and that Stephen Hawking is great. On the other hand, Hitler conquered more than Alexander, but he was a very bad person. Here is the big question then. Was Alexander great?
오케이. 자,
타임 체크다. 중 체크다. Alexander named the horse Busa policy and rode it most of his life. He rode it through many battles. When this horse was killed in battle, Alexander was heartbroken. He had lost his best friend. Later, he named a city after the horse. Maybe Alexander was so clever because he had a great teacher. His teacher was Aristotle. Aristotle taught him to ask questions about everything. Alexander was a good student. Even later, when he was a god kid, he was still curious about the world and how this works. He's spiritual.
오케이.
어느 정도예요?
21초?
네.
빨리 읽었네? 대학생이 되어버렸네.
대학생이야. 드디어 마지막 책이에요.
마지막 책이 되니까 대학생이 됐어. 그치?
네.
오케이. 그러면 봅시다. 오케이. Book 8. What's the title?
Alexander the Great.
Okay, page 6. Long ago, what made a king great?
Long ago, however, a king was called great if he conquered many cities and countries.
Okay. So a great fighter. The great fighter was the great.
Yes. 그렇다고 생각. Yes, they did.
Who was Alexander?
Alexander was a conqueror who lived 2,000 years ago.
Okay, what did he conquer?
He conquered more lands than other kings. In fact, he conquered most of the Western world.
Why was the world small then?
Because Western people did not know about most of Asia, most of Africa, or any of the Americas.
Okay. This page, what was their world?
Their world was just a small area around the Mediterranean Sea.
Okay, Mediterranean Sea. Around the Mediterranean Sea. 그 세계가 그들이 알고 있는 지구상의 전 세계였던 거야. What is Alexander's empire?
His empire is now Greece, Turkey, Syria, Israel, Egypt, Iraq, Iran, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and part of India.
Why didn't Alexander's father want to buy the horse?
Because the horse was very wild. So Philip did not want to buy it.
What did Alexander notice?
Alexander noticed that the horse was afraid of his own shadow.
Did his father give him the horse?
Yes, his father was pleased with Alexander, so he gave him the horse.
Okay, verse 10. What did Alexander name his horse?
Alexander named the horse Bucephalus.
What happened when Bucephalus was killed in battle?
Alexander was heartbroken. He had lost his best friend.
Who was Alexander's teacher?
His teacher was Aristotle.
Okay, Aristotle. Okay, 우리는 뭐라고 부르지? 이 사람?
Aristoteles.
Aristoteles. What did Aristotle teach him?
To ask questions about everything.
Okay, right.
선생님?
그럼. 자, 이 그림 본 적 있어? 이 그림?
이것은 어디서 딱 한 번 봐본 것 같은데.
아테네 합당이라는 그림인데 유명한 그림이지. 여기 이제 여러 철학자들이 나오는데 이 중에 이 사람이 아리스토텔레스. 아리스토텔레스 이 사람이.
아르키메데스도 있나?
그 옆에 있던 사람은 플라톤이고. 플라톤, 그다음에 아리스토텔레스. Page 12. What is the largest empire in the world before Alexander?
The largest empire in the world was the Persian
Okay, 누구의?
Empire of the great King Darius.
Okay. What did Alexander have to conquer first?
Alexander had to conquer Persia first, if he wanted to conquer anything at all.
Okay. 왜냐하면은
그냥 일단
그
왜냐하면
당시에 가장 지배력이 있었던 나라에 있으니 거기를
뚫으면 전 세계
정복해야 그 다음 또
전체를 다
영토를 확장할 수 있겠지. Why was it amazing when Alexander beat Darius and his army?
Because Darius' army had 8 times more men. But
Did Darius escape?
yes, Darius escaped.
Okay, next page. What happened when Alexander finally found Darius?
Darius had been killed by his own army.
And how did Alexander feel?
Alexander was disappointed and gave the dead king a big funeral.
Alright, okay. 왜 disappointed 한 거야? 자기 손으로.
자기 손으로 죽여야 했는데.
Why did Alexander give Darius a big funeral?
Big funeral. Because maybe he admired Darius. Maybe Alexander. Yes. 자기 손으로 죽였지.
그러면서 이렇게 장례식을 거창하게 해준 건 또 무슨 신이야? 이거?
그러게요.
Did anyone in the West know anything about Indian people?
Yes. Nobody in the West knew anything about Indian people.
그러니까 알았다는 거야? 몰랐다는 거야?
몰랐다. No.
몰랐다는 거야? No, they didn't. Page 16. What did the Indian armies ride?
The Indian armies rode on strange animals called elephants.
Was Alexander afraid?
No, Alexander was not afraid.
What did Alexander do after he beat the Indian armies?
He became friends with their kings and made some of them his generals.
What did conquerors sometimes do?
Made the road better and people could buy and sell things more easily.
오케이. 그래서 어떤 점이 좋아졌던 것 같아?
상업?
이제 서로 교역을 할 수 있도록 했기 때문에 그게 좋아졌겠지. Next page. Were the Persians happy to be conquered by the Greeks?
No, the Persians, for example, suddenly were not happy to be conquered by Greece.
What did the Egyptians do when Alexander freed them?
They made Alexander king of Egypt
Why did the Indians respect Alexander?
for his bravery at high level of education.
교육.
Education.
High level of 교육. 교육의 수준.
Education.
에? 잘 봐봐. 교육의 수준.
EDUK. EDUC.
교육.
Education.
그렇지. Education. Education. The high level of education.
Yes.
What did Alexander spread?
Alexander spread Greek culture all over the world.
Right. 그렇지. 엄청난 여러 나라의 지금 영토를 통합한 거잖아. 그럼 뭐가 문제일 것 같아?
문화가
문화 다 다르지.
네.
문화 다 다르고 다 이제 사람들도 다 다르고 근데 제일 큰 문제가 뭔 것 같아? 통치를 하려면은 통치하려고 그러는데 다 뭔가 달라. 가장 중요한 게
생활 방식
네?
식습관
언어가 다르잖아.
아, 언어.
그치?
응.
언어 달라.
여긴 그리스어 쓰는데 저기는 딴 데 쓰.
그치? 근데 예를 들면 한국어도 지금 그 표준어로 통합이 안 돼 있으면은
사투리 제주도 사투리.
그치? 막 알아듣기 힘들잖아 어떤 경우에는
응.
그런 사투리도. 그러니까 그런 문제가 있는 거야 한 나라 내에서도.
응.
근데 여러 나라를 통합하니까 이 언어가 얼마나 복잡하겠어.
응.
그치? 그래서 알렉산더가 한 일이 뭐냐면은 언어를 통합하는 거야. 그 언어 통합했어. 그리스어로. 근데 그리스어를 표준 그리스어를 만들어. 이 코이네라고 불렀어 그거를.
섞지 않고 그냥
코이네.
고이네.
그
고이스.
그리스어를 이제 하나의 표준어 같이 지금 말하는 이렇게 통합을 한 거야. Next page. Why wasn't Alexander the most kind or generous?
Because many people died because of him.
Okay. When a city near his hometown rebelled, what did Alexander do?
He took his army and burned the city down.
Okay. When he burned down a city near his hometown, how did other people feel?
Other cities were afraid to fight him.
Were Gandhi and Einstein great?
Yes.
Right.
근데 저거 3번 들어가도 그냥 똑같이 뜻쓰기 이런 거 다 하는 거야.
똑같은 방법이야. 같은 방법. Okay. Is Yugan great?
Yes.
Yes.